Welcome to Community Conversations. My name is Steve Mantis. I'm the host for the show, and my guest today is Judith Monteith-Farrell, the MPP for Thunder Bay-Atikokan. Welcome, Judith.
Hi, Steve.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity.
So, give us a little bit about your personal history. Did you grow up in Thunder Bay? Give us a little bit about your background.
Yes, I'm born and raised in Thunder Bay, went to school here, and went away for university, then returned, and I had a career first with the federal government and had done some work in counseling, and that was devolved. And then I took on a 25-year career with the Public Service Alliance of Canada, where I did negotiations and organizing new units, representing the region. And I really enjoyed that career. But I felt it was time for something new. And I then was approached to run for the NDP. And I had been in the past, but because of family and responsibilities, it wasn't the right time for me when the opportunities came up. And now I was free and clear and able to do it. And so I stepped up, and when John Rafferty couldn't be the candidate any longer, I said I'd do it.
So just stepping back for a second, so the Public Service Alliance of Canada, so that's the union that represents all the workers in the federal government. Do I have that right?
Yes, the federal government, all the agencies, and all the things that were devolved to the private sector from the federal government. So we followed our members. So that really was a difference. And we also then started organizing in the Indigenous community. So I represented Wequidon Lodge, Anishinaabe Police, Anishinaabe Police, and other groups. So it really it became from a federal government kind of union, and at the end of my career, I had a very diverse membership.
And from that experience, representing all these workers in the public sector, what brought you into politics? What was it? What were you seeing there that you thought you needed to go to a new place to deal with some of those issues?
I think my career has been about service, and I saw that in my union career, I was helping individuals and then sometimes groups if we negotiated a good contract, but I also saw the impact of legislation and laws and how that affected workers' lives. And I knew if you wanted to make changes on a macro level to help people on a different level, that then it's required that you get involved with politics. And so I've always been involved with the party, but this is a whole new role, obviously. But I'm also really, really interested in having that impact in our community. I see our community is a great community full of great people. We need a representative that's going to have our voice in Queen's Park.
So you made the choice to move from representing workers, in a way, to really representing everybody in our community. What are some of your top priorities that you want to achieve now that you've been elected into office?
The one thing that I really would want is that people, the citizens of Thunder Bay, participate in politics. I want them to be engaged. So if I'm going to be that conduit, that's great, but they need to be engaged in politics to make an impact and change in our country, our province, in our city. And we have some struggles here, and I think that is, if I could help in any way to assist in getting those problems solved, then that's the role I see for myself.
So when you talk about just regular people being engaged in politics, how do they do that? What are some of the concrete ways people can be engaged?
I think people really underestimate the voices that are important, like that politicians listen to and that political parties listen to. That people that take the time to write the letter, to sign the petition, to become involved with a political party, to share their stories and their concerns, that makes politicians have to listen. There's no shortage of lobbyists for special interests of powerful groups in our society. What we're missing is the voice of the common person, and that needs to be done on a day-to-day basis. So writing those letters, making those phone calls, writing those emails.
And are you talking about letters that would go to you or what is that engagement
a
like?
broader outreach. I definitely encourage people to write to me because that informs my discussion when I'm in caucus, when I'm in Queen's Park, having a discussion or a debate on an issue. I can draw on that experience from our community. So I really encourage people to write to me, but I also encourage them to write to the government, to the ministers, that are responsible for the area that they have a concern in, because they need to be informed about the northern perspective on the issues and the decisions they're making.
And when I think about engagement, there could be all kinds of levels. So if a person is really concerned about a certain issue, they write to the minister. Is it just say, I've got a concern about this, or in what depth? How engaged can people be in terms of our provincial government?
I think they can be very engaged if they take the time to share their concerns, but also offering solutions. When a lobbyist comes to see me from a mining company, let's say, they're very clear on what they need from the government and the decisions and the impact or change in regulation that they require. And I think that's important because they're the ones engaged in that. And so if a senior has an issue around housing, they may have some very concrete ideas on what are the things that we need changed in our community to make that happen for them. So I think they have answers.
And what do you see as some of the challenges coming forward for you in the next three and a half years?
Well, I am in the opposition, the official opposition. And so what I see at the starting of this government is their unwillingness to listen. Now, I think that's not working as well as they would like, and they are getting a lot of pushback from common citizens and from us. And so I'm hoping that those doors and opportunities to do collaborative decision making will open up, like more time in committees, not limiting public debate on issues that have an impact on, in a broad sense of our province. They've been busy to rush through some of those things, and I'm really hoping that we are able to engage on a more meaningful level.
So coming back a little bit to the engagement piece as well. So how do you see your role in facilitating engagement of the people you represent here in the riding?
What I do is sometimes I walk right across the aisle and say, I have a person that wants to talk to you and they've been trying for a long time, Minister, and maybe you'd like to return their phone call. And sometimes that works. And other times you're writing, we have liaison officers that we can deal with each ministry. We have the opportunity to write written questions that the ministers have to answer. In some way or another. Yes, and we also have oral questions, but oral questions are really, sort of a theater. That's you get very few answers in question period. But written questions, we more often get a bit more circumstances. So, for instance, someone asked me, they were worried that some funding was going to be cut to a certain project. They hadn't heard that it was confirmed. I went to the minister, asked them what's the future of this project, and they very clearly gave me a written response saying that the money was was coming and there was just a delay in processing. So those kinds of things. Excellent.
We're going to have to take a short break. Please stay with us. When we come back, we're going to delve into some of the challenging issues here in Thunder Bay in Northwest Ontario. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis. And my guest today is MPP Judith Monteith-Farrell, representing the riding of Thunder Bay-Atikokan. Welcome back, Judith.
Thanks.
So we were talking about some of the issues really that you saw in your professional life and bringing them into really the political realm. The challenges of working people. And you mentioned earlier around the challenges of really the working poor. So tell me, what do you hope to do around that issue of, I guess, equality or equity in our society and including those that are kind of on the bottom rung in society? Well, economically.
Yeah. What we had is, we had the basic income project, pilot project happening in Thunder Bay, and we were very disappointed about that cancellation and the way it was canceled. So we fought very hard and met with those folks and helped them in their struggles. And we were successful to some degree in the sense that at least we pushed the end date of the project to the end of March so that folks had some time to plan versus there was going to be a 1 month wind down. So
that's right. So that's March of this year.
Yes, is the final. Now, unless something changes. But it was really unfortunate because I think it would have been exciting to see the results of that, to see the impact. Even in a short while, people's lives had changed, and some of them were successful in obtaining employment or finishing their education. And in what people don't know, a lot of people that were participating in that were the working poor. They have jobs, and so that brings us to the minimum wage, which we were very disappointed did not go up to $15 an hour. And there's no truth in that there were less jobs because the minimum wage increased. Actually, we've seen an increase in jobs in Ontario, so in that level of salary. So I think, we're disappointed, and we're going to continue to, push the government to see what are you doing. There's struggles for folks on WSIB and disability. WSIB, we see increasing numbers of people that are going to have to go on to disability programs rather than having the WSIB meet the responsibility that they have to, because they're funded by workers and by employers to meet those needs for injured workers. And so they shouldn't have to be going on things like basic income and Ontario Works or ODSP. Those struggles are real, and the other thing is that I focus a lot of my attention on those in need of that, where their basic needs aren't being met. So, meeting with folks that are helping and saying, how can we do this better? And I think there's a lot of thought around that, and so even though the government's announced some changes to Ontario Works and ODSP, we're interested to see how that plays out and to ensure that it's working for the folks that it's supposed to be helping.
So just exploring, in a way, both ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Program, and WSIB, both of which I'm pretty involved with,
yes,
around being a person with a disability and around work. It feels like sometimes the government, and this government, is more interested in reducing the costs of providing the program than providing quality service. Where are we going as a government in terms of looking after the folks that need help? I mean, we've got 50% unemployment. If you're a person with a disability, you have a 50-50 chance. And mostly it's people who have really mild disabilities are the ones that get employed. The ones with more significant disabilities, the workforce really doesn't want them. But the expectation is you've got to go get a job anyways, and you're not worthy of benefits. So with that kind of headspace, where do we go? How do we deal with these issues?
Well, I think what we need to understand is health is our largest cost in Ontario government. And one of the social determinants of health is the level of poverty someone's in. And so we need to make that connection, and that's what we're trying to do, is to say, in the long run, if you take care of folks in a respectful fashion so they are able to take care of themselves in a respectful fashion, things fall in place. But more importantly, their health stays in a good place. And that is something they understand. It's actually good for the system. It's for where we're spending the most money. If we ensure people have enough to eat and good food, if we're taking care of their needs and helping them, assisting them in finding employment or doing those things, their health will improve and the system will actually cost less. And there are studies that show this in other countries. And so we bring that message forth increasingly. We tie it together because none of the solutions are silos. we need to, and the government of the day, does talk about working across ministries, across the silos that exist in our systems. And I hope that they'll meet that commitment. It's early days. So it seems that, the emphasis is on cost, but, these things are tied together.
So I think that issue of crossing the silos is so important. Certainly when we talk to folks at WSIB, they don't really see their responsibility as anything more than a very narrow view of the service they provide. When we talk to them about the number of people ending up on social assistance that started as a workplace injury, they don't seem to care, they don't seem to have any information about that. How do we cross those silos? How do we understand that saving money on this side is costing way more on this side? And that if we do a good job here, it's going to help across the board, but not in that one silo.
I think it's a culture in the workplace and in the public sector where each ministry was very much its own entity. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be broken down. The government says that they are looking at those systems and looking at breaking down those silos. So we have to ensure that they're informed about that. And when there are opportunities, we need to, as an opposition party, bring those forward and tell them, have we thought about it a little bit in a different fashion? And we have to hope that, everyone who gets into politics hopefully is there for the common good. Their idea of the common good and how to get there may be terribly different, but it's still there. And so I think with time and with open communication, I think things can be accomplished. And
what are you seeing in your first 6-7 months as a member in opposition? Is the government or some of the government members interested in working together?
Well, there is, in the last while, I guess a couple of weeks, there's been some discussion about that, where members increasingly are, I think, tired of the very negative kind of messaging and the negative, insular kind of decision making, and there was a minister that wrote me a letter and said, I want you to know that a certain group in your community got money and for something in your portfolio. And that didn't happen before. So I'm saying, well, okay, that is a positive kind of thing, that I don't have to ask. They're actually coming to me and saying, this is your riding and we want you to know that this is what's happening.
We have to take another short break.
Right.
Please stay with us and we'll get into a couple more important issues coming up. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Judith Monteith-Farrell, the MPP for Thunder Bay-Atikokan. Just so that we all know, that's our provincial parliament. So, Judith, one of the big issues that's been in the news for some time here in Thunder Bay in Northwest Ontario is really that issue of racism.
Yes.
What's your take on that? What can we do to really move towards reconciliation, assuming you think that's the way to go?
Well, in my campaign literature, I included my commitment to the Truth and Reconciliation findings and the things that they needed to do that were identified. And I think it's important that we should all read that document. It's not scary as citizens. I think there are a lot of things emphasized with education, which I think a lot of groups in Thunder Bay are already trying to do. And there is a lot of goodwill. I think there needs to be a coordination of that goodwill. But I think, just like the report on the police services, systemic racism is hard for people to understand, I think. They don't want to be called racist. People become very sort of, I'm not a racist, how dare you call it? They get angry, they get defensive, and that's not the approach. We have to look at our systems that were put in place when there were a lot of racist kinds of attitudes around. And so those systems, when they were in place, obviously aren't working. And we as a city can have a great opportunity to go from a place where we had a problem to a place where we found solutions. And Canada, across Canada, they could use those solutions as well, or models for different kinds of, we have a lot of organizations. I've had great conversations with people who are now saying, yes, you know, I have to make this a priority. I have to look at my organization. I have to see how I can do things differently so that if there are racist systems in place or attitudes, I need to address them and find a way to work towards eliminating them. And Indigenous people in our community who come from all over Northern Ontario, that's such a opportunity for us to learn about the land and about all the rich. We wouldn't be here in North America if it wasn't for the goodwill of the Indigenous people who allowed us to come to their country, who helped us. We'd all freeze to death in Northern Ontario. Back in the day, we became partners in trade, and it went horribly wrong along the way, and we need to identify that. So I see it as a real opportunity in Thunder Bay, and I hope to be a big part of that.
So really following along your thought, I mean, it seems to me that racism is a major issue everywhere in the world. You know, whether it's the U.S.-Mexican border or the, you know, over in Asia with the Rohingya, I don't even say it right. People come into conflict because they think this other group is, as you say, the other. So the challenges we face here could reasonably be applied many places, and as likewise we can learn from what others are doing. And I know I struggle myself because I feel like I grew up with racist attitudes, and they don't just disappear because I don't want them there. I've been trying to work on them for years and years and years. What else, what can people do to really move towards reconciliation in their personal life and in their work life?
I think when I talk to Indigenous people, it's very important for us to recognize it. Quit denying, quit being defensive and saying, okay, yes, that this is here, and I need to learn how not to act. And like you said, it's not a overnight magic wand that we're going to say, okay, all our systems are now fixed. And it's a partnership because Indigenous people are the victims of those things. They have to tell us, like, we need to have relationships. And we have very good relationships in lots of places, but that needs to grow and develop. And I know, speaking to Indigenous leaders, they're more than willing to come to the table and work on things. So I'm happy to say that. And like I said, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think we could be a model.
So one of the issues where this plays out is housing. I mean, I've heard Indigenous people kind of go, it's almost impossible to rent an apartment here because people don't want to rent to natives. But there's an overall issue around housing and affordable housing and adequate housing. Where are we going really from the provincial view on housing, and how can we address those issues?
Unfortunately, housing is the solution that was there was a crisis in housing across the province. There's been a lack of investment in affordable housing from the federal and provincial government. The federal government has recently announced some funding around housing, but that's where that them and us attitude comes up again, because there are all sorts of people who can't find affordable housing in Thunder Bay and region. And then, so they say, well, why is that person getting a house when I'm not getting a house? I'm on the list for 3 years and they've only been on the list for 1 year. Why are they getting, priority over me? And so, but the bottom line is that there's just not enough housing. This government said they took rent controls off, and they said that is going to encourage private sector to build more units. Well, I don't see that as an affordable kind of solution. And we've brought that up and will be making that a priority for our caucus.
We have about a minute left in the show. One of the issues that has really challenged me is resource development in the north. And so many of our towns have faced the boom and bust cycle. And I'm wondering, is there another way? You know, we've had town after town after town going, we're doing great, and then the railroad, the forestry, the mine shuts down, and, you know, their life savings are gone. Is there a different way of doing resource development?
Well, you know, we're rich in resources in Northern Ontario, and there's undeveloped. And we saw the example of the forestry industry where it was decimated and now it's in a boom cycle again. But I think the whole idea of diversification and northern development, like when we have a resource and we have the resources, like financial resources that come with that development, we need to look at diversification at that point, just not take the, you know, the benefits of that boom time and not look at, okay, what happens in 5 years? It's like the oil industry. I mean, yeah, it's great, but it's not renewable.
We're out of time. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can go to my website, or they could go to my email, which is online. If you say,
We'll put that up on the screen
on
now.
the screen, and our phone number at the constituency office is 622-1920. Nice and easy.
Judith, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks to our audience for their viewing, and we want you to stay safe, and we'll see you again soon.